Damo, my friend, welcome to the Johnny Vedmore Show. How are you today?
Thank you very much for having me on, Johnny. Very well, thank you. Sun's shining, birds are singing. Tories and Labour both had a rinse in last weekend, just before the weekend as it was in the local election. So, yeah, plenty to be happy about and smiley about, really, isn't there?
Yes, there is. And yeah, of course, I do love that accent. My first ever girlfriend was from Bodmin, but don't tell anybody. Right. So you're a self-proclaimed fearless socialist. How hard is it to be on the left these days?
Well, we've had a bit of a beating in the last few years, haven't we? To be honest, all the smears, I guess we can call them. It would be fair enough to say, all the Corbyn support is, which is where I came from, which is where I come into politics for. Really, the man I am, I like to say I'm a monster of the right wing zone making, but really, Jeremy Corbyn has got a lot to answer for as well, I guess, because he kind of pointed me in a certain direction, I guess you could say, at a point in life when I was feeling a little bit directionless politically, and we ran with it. But of course, we all know what happened with him and all of that. So it's kind of, where does the left fit in now? Where can we kind of make our presence known? And for my part, I moved along to the Green Party after the Labour Party no longer felt like a home for me, no longer something that I could relate to, certainly. The direction it's gone in now is absolutely appalling. And I'll give you an example of how quickly that's happened, because we're looking towards a general election again now this year, hopefully at some point, if Rishi Sunak finds his spine and calls it. But 2019, when we had the last one, I was a Labour member. I was a constituency Labour Party officer. I was a branch chairman, and I was coordinating part of the election campaign across a bit of my little corner of Cornwall in the far southwest, a nice constituency as I live in. And now I would not countenance supporting voting Labour in any way, shape, or form. I am aversely against them as much as I would be any other Tory, because the politics is no different. So why should we give a free pass to some because the colour of their rosette is different when the politics is all the same?
Yeah, completely. I agree with you, and I come from the same path. To be perfectly honest, when it was Brown and then Ed Miliband and Ed Balls, I was like, I'm out of it. As soon as Miliband and Balls, I was like, I'm not going to vote ever again. And eventually, my housemate and brother from another mother came in one day and was like, "Have you heard about this Jeremy Corbyn character?" And I was suddenly drawn back into it because I felt like we had some form of like cross to die on, and it was a hard time because of course I don't think he personally, I think he should have really stood up against the Zionist lobby more wholeheartedly once he was leader of the Labour Party instead of just kowtowing to it all of the time. Talking about something else, so you're Green Party councillor in the UK, or you're a member of the Green Party. I'm not sure how it works where you are and what's going on at the moment. How did the last week elections go for the Greens?
It was a good outing for the Greens. I'm a town councillor, as it happens, for the Green Party. I actually an elected official for the Green Party, which is not something I ever was under Labour. Which goes to show how welcoming they have been of socialists, actually. But yeah, the election for the Greens, again, this set of local elections, just like last year's, very, very successful by and large. People have been, obviously, the mainstream media have been fixating on Labour and how much have they taken off the Tories? And I've done a couple of videos out on my channel on this as well. And Labour basically took about 2/5 of the votes the Tories lost. The Tories lost about half their council seats, but the remaining 3/5, roughly speaking, went Green, Independents, and Liberal Democrats. So the Green Party made massive inroads there. There's a couple of exceptional places that are worth mentioning. Bristol City Council, the Green Party is now the largest party on that council now. Crucially, it's an area where the Greens are looking to get their second MP. Green Party co-leader Carla Denyer standing in Bristol Central against Thangam Debonair. And every single one of the council ward seats in that constituency, or what will be that constituency, because it's new under boundary changes, every single one of them went Green. So that's a huge
Mhm.
endorsement. And it's also reflective of how local elections can have a bearing, have a reflection on general election voting intention as well. But there was other remarkable results for the Greens as well. I think they're the largest party now on Hastings Council. Stroud, I think they did really well. Maidstone in Kent, they took 9 council seats off the Tories. So it's a party that's taking seats off of all wings of what is basically right-wing politics now, and it's certainly on the march. But it's interesting to see how independents are doing similarly, because although independent candidates are nothing new at local election level, there's a lot of press attention going towards independent candidates that are now running for parliamentary level, which is not something you typically see. But we've got people in all corners of the country who are crowdfunding, whose communities are getting together and organizing and selecting their own candidates from amongst themselves. And I think this is a notable reflection on the fact that Keir Starmer's Labour Party have been parachuting in candidates for years in by-elections now, have not been allowing local people to pick from amongst themselves, but instead are, putting somebody on them that they already approve of. And this has really gone down badly in communities up and down the country. And they've got together, they've had their meetings, they've chosen their candidates, and now they're funding from within themselves. There's a couple of notable instances of that would be the running of Andrew Feinstein, or the selection, I should say, of Andrew Feinstein to run against Keir Starmer himself in Holborn and St Pancras. That was selected by the Okisa movement. That was a community group that got together, basically looking for one candidate they wanted to stand against Keir Starmer. And equally in Ilford North, there is a brilliant young British Palestinian candidate who has been selected from within the community, Liane Mohammed, to stand against Wes Streeting and try and take his seat too. And this is being reflected up and down the country in all manner of little pockets. And we don't see independents standing at parliamentary level ever. So as much as I'm excited about how the Greens have got on as well, and obviously being my party, and I like the party structure. I like being part of that kind of a grouping of a movement. It's happening at an independent level as well. I find that fascinating.
Damien, my friend, we got a couple of questions from the chat already. Interesting. People are intrigued, and they're intrigued about the same thing because you're within the Green Party. And the question is from Dark Commission first, who I like very much. He's a very good guy. As a Green, do you believe in man-made climate change?
Do I believe in man-made climate change? Yes.
Yeah, you do.
Yes. Yes. Of course there is.
Yes.
It's for since the Industrial Revolution, we have been pumping all manner of chemicals and what have you not into the atmosphere for a long time. Of that, a lot of that, we haven't really realised the damage that was happening. But equally, it's interesting. It came in Green Party guys on. We'll go in with the climate questions. We're about so much more than that, though. I came
Yeah.
into it because of the socialist element of it. And absolutely, climate change is a crucial. It's the single most important issue of our time. It has to be addressed. It has to be acknowledged that it is happening. It is not a natural phenomena. It is being driven too quickly for to, for it to be possibly believable that mankind's actions are not having some form of an impact. It's something that has to be looked at, examined. Yes, obviously these things, volcanic eruptions and all the rest of it play their part as well, but it's being driven massively by big business, big industry, oil, gas. We're seeing all these licenses being granted in the North Sea again, and that's being done at the expense of alternative methods of energy production, for example, offshore wind farms, for one. I've long said, being down here in Cornwall, I've long felt that, we have this massive, whacking great coastline. Why is there so little investment in sort of researching tidal technology? Because although people complain about wind farms and the like, that, the wind stops blowing, you can't blow the windmills around, the tide never stops. And when you've got a whacking great coastline, it seems a rotten shame to not take advantage of that more. And I just think there are better ways of generating energy and generating economic production, all the rest of it, that doesn't involve pumping gases of one noxious type or another into the atmosphere. And I believe it'll be cheaper in the long run too, because it's utterly sustainable. The wind will always blow, the tides will always come in, oil and gas will not be around forever. It's economic silliness, apart from the climate argument with it, to just keep on investing in that when we know it does cause some damage, however much of it you may agree or disagree with that. But when there are cleaner alternatives that are completely sustainable forever and a day, why are we not focusing on that? And the answer ultimately comes down to who's making money out of it and who's donating that to what particular party, because that's what it always seems to come back to.
I would like to see those sort of what's seen as cleaner energies be utilized more, but the fact is they don't generate as much power as oil and gas generate by a long way. I mean, it's about 1 to 5% of most nations' power comes from such sources, and I understand that that could be increased a lot. A lot of people would say that it's like the release of carbon in the air actually feeds a lot of plants and a lot of other things, and that these same industries who are pumping, who are the ones who are really doing the damage to the environment. And I'm not saying there's no environmental damage, and I don't think a lot of my audience would say the same, or people asking the question. I think a lot of them will say that the people who are in control of creating the climate change narrative are the exact same companies who are pumping crap into our rivers, into our seas, and then saying that we're to blame for it. So I think there's a lot to be said about where the damage actually comes from, how to stop it, and how to bring people along with that. But they have, I mean, it was global warming, then it changed to climate change, now it's changing to the climate crisis. And if you look at like things like the World Economic Forum, etc., they do change their narrative. Sorry for the pun, but as the wind blows, as many times as the wind blows. So I think
Yeah,
that's what a lot of people would say in the chat.
I think that you were possibly straying not so much from the climate argument, or entirely the climate argument. And obviously, you talk about carbon feeding natural systems and mechanisms. Of course, it does. There's this thing called the carbon cycle, after all. But it's the amount of it that's being put out, and obviously, you can then look at locking this carbon away as well, and preventing so much of it from escaping. There's a lot of talk of what we can actually do ourselves to help with preventing so much carbon getting into the atmosphere. It's called carbon sequestration. I'm actually doing some work on the town council myself on that. It's actually quite interesting thing to get into and read into, and what you can actually do to, if simple things like you go out and mow your garden and cut your grass, you leave your grass to lie where it is and rot back into the ground rather than removing it. You remove it, you're actually pumping more carbon into the atmosphere. These are all things that we can actually do. But coming back to the big business pumping carbon into the atmosphere argument, I think, yes, there is certainly that argument. However, who put all this power and who granted all this ability for these companies to do that to start with? And that all comes back to privatization of electricity, of gas, of our, you mentioned the pollution in our waterways right now, which is getting weakened again, apparently. Again, it comes back down to privatization. We were promised this panacea of more investment if we let private business take it over, and we haven't seen it. All we see is vast amounts of sums of money that could be used for investment ending up in shareholders' pockets instead. And at the end of the day, these businesses are going to do whatever generates the biggest profits and the biggest returns for said shareholders. And if that's going to be oil and gas and not the long-term research into better forms of wind energy production, tidal energy production, geothermal energy production, however, whatever suits a given area one to another better. If the R&D is not there, just like we haven't seen, for example, reservoirs, if we go back to the water companies for a second, ever since water privatization happened in the 1980s, not one new reservoir was built anywhere, and we wonder why we have water shortages in the summer. We don't have the vessels to collect it. Yet water companies were selling off old reservoirs left, right, and centre to developers to build housing developments. Where's the sense? They don't work. They don't, the lie that Thatcher sold us. And yeah, I was born in the late 70s. I basically grew up with nothing, knowing nothing else than what I have, than what has gone on and what the Tories have done and kept on doing with privatisation and what have you. It's just been one steady sell off after sell off after sell off, and they still try to tell us that this is how it has to be, this is the best value for money, this is how things are going to get fixed, and it just doesn't happen. And we've seen this for 40 years now. So it really is about time, I think, people woke up a little bit to the fact that we need to, as a lefty, rotten lefty as I call myself, come back to this notion of nationalisation, which is Green Party policy, and bring these things back under our control in house for our, for us to manage again. Yes, there's all these comments that I know older people will certainly tell you who lived through it. They say, "Oh, it was awful in the '70s," and how terrible British gas and all that, the British water companies were. But what they don't realise at the time, and what has come out since, is that Thatcher was intentionally underfunding these to make them fail in order to soften things up for the sell-off that followed. It was a big con then, and we're still being conned now, and we need to say enough is enough to that.
Yeah, okay. I tell you what, you're going to have to come on again because I know that my listeners and watchers are all extremely interested. They don't, they don't get many times where Green Party candidates come out of their comfort zone. I think that's what one of the problems is. We don't get to discuss this enough, and we don't have enough conversation. So they don't know what the Green Party policies are, and they don't. I would love to get you back on sometime soon. I know we got our time is up now, but definitely to talk about a load of stuff. Damien, it's been a pleasure to have you on. No thanks for coming on, my
Thanks
friend.
for having me on. If I might say one more thing though before I go, every single Green Party policy there is listed on the website at all times, unlike every other party. So if people genuinely want to know what the Green Party stands for, go to the website and have a look.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of people who'd be interested to hear your views on things like vaccines as well, but we'll get onto that on another occasion. Thank you very much for coming on, and have a nice day. All right, look after yourself.
Take care, Johnny. Thanks for having me on.